Hi, welcome to part two. Just like part one, the lecture is a combination of videos as well as annotated lecturing. So just be aware that it is a little bit long, but feel free to split it in half. You don't have to watch the whole thing in one sit down, which is not something that I suggest anyway. Although I do record all of them at the same time, you don't have to sit and watch them all together. Last lecture we covered middle school, and now we're going to get into high school. Now, I'll say finally, because I've kind of been like holding it in. Sometimes I forget that I'm ahead of you and the lecture, and you haven't discovered this yet. So now we're finally at the time. So if you haven't noticed, funding and also what it means to be gifted, everything changes in high school because the dynamics are so stressful on schools, I believe, and also personnel and just the governance of programs all in general. I feel like being that I've been able to teach both middle school and high school, I can see how programs suffer from the changes, the state regulations and requirements, and then certain things fall under the radar. So I feel like gifted education kind of takes a dive in high school, and you'll see why I think this. So this PowerPoint starts off a little different because unlike middle school, they actually talk about the mental and emotional and social needs outside of the classroom teacher's role and those supports that the school should offer. So I thought that was a pretty cool advice that the counselor provided in regards to gifted and talented students. And then the rest of it goes into the statistics, and the report is the same one that I provided for you in regards to middle school, but it's from the high school, and it's the same group that reported the data from the program coordinators that responded to the survey administered. So again, this lecture will be audio. I'm going to take away the video part of me, and I'll move through as quickly as possible so that the video time takes up most of the time that you have. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, so first things first, what's counselors' roles, or what is the counselor's role within a school? So if you haven't already noticed, within your specific school setting, school counselors are very far and few. Most of them share a group of schools, if not a few. And mental health begins to become a really big problem in middle school, where a lot of behavioral or emotional disorders start to become diagnosed. So let's hear what she has to say.
School counselors, one of our major ethical responsibilities is to serve all students. I sometimes think that just with everything going on, gifted and talented students tend to be left out of the picture. There's a lot of mythology around that if you're identified as a gifted and talented learner, that by default that is acting as a buffer in some ways. So, okay, if you're gifted, then you're just going to get it. That's not the case. I mean, every student is also wrestling with their own set of issues. One of the things we talk about in gifted education is something called asynchronous development. And most of the time what we mean by that is that the students' intellectual abilities are far outpacing their other abilities. So their emotional levels may not be there yet. Their physical levels may not be there yet. You have students who are wanting to perform at such high levels and they might be tending towards perfectionistic tendencies because they demand high quality of themselves. It's also possible that what they need intellectually in terms of stimulation is not something that the school can provide. You see things like advanced vocabulary in younger students. They're ready to read earlier. They're ready to do more and in more depth and complexity, but that's not going to necessarily mesh with a traditional sort of American education standard. So you have some then students who are deciding, hey, you know what? I'm done with this. And so you start seeing patterns of underachievement very early. I think school counselors are doing the job anyway, but not necessarily maybe with the level of knowledge they would like to have to do it as efficiently as effectively as they could. Always go local first because they're your best expert, so go find a teacher of the talented and gifted or your gifted coordinator. From there, there's a bunch of resources from the professional organizations, state departments help, universities with gifted centers, universities with school counseling preparation programs, they can all be useful.
Okay, so I think I always try to get away from the videos that come up after, but I never know what they will be. Anywho, um, I think the perspective of counseling and assisting gifted students within their transitional phases of dealing with their gifted abilities, as well as the emotional and social components, is a well deserved topic to explore that has often been neglected. And if you do not have a school counselor, it may be something that you might want to invest in because at the end of the day, I remember teaching ninth grade a few times. Oftentimes, when students enter into the high school setting, if they don't feel like their needs are being met, some of them will disengage and then eventually lead to dropouts. So, you want to kind of cater to the challenges that they may have. And you don't know, they may or may not be gifted, or you may not know their diagnosis prior to maybe mid semester, but understanding the dynamics that they might face within an inclusive setting is critical in order to provide services for them. And I'm saying all this to say that a lot of it within a high school setting falls on the teacher. So here you have only 232 district coordinators who indicated that they were providing gifted and talented opportunities to their students at the high school level. Actually responded, while 77, which is 24.9% of the school district coordinators reported not providing gifted and talented opportunities at the high school level. So it kind of is up to the teacher to see, number one, if you know your school doesn't provide the resources for gifted and talented students at the high school level, then looking out for the student and providing more opportunities, even if that means, getting outsourcing the resources and calling in any extra supports that you can, not literally calling, but trying to find another way to ensure that the student get their needs met. And that could be partnering with a virtual program or anything that's out there. And then it also reports that 50, which is 16.3% of the district coordinators reported that a gifted program had been discontinued or cut within the past 5 years. And this is kind of disheartening because it doesn't look like at the elementary or middle school level that we cut programs, but it seems like schools delegate funding appropriate to those programs that seem like they are well serving students. But think about it, if the student is not showing engagement and they're not even being asked to perform at their capabilities or their max ability, how would you then be able to justify the need for a gifted program? You wouldn't. If you stop diagnosing and you stop noticing the gifted and talented at this level, or students more concerned with peer pressure and also mingling in, or may have family dynamics or even social components that interfere with their academic or talented abilities, you may see programs be cut, but it's not because the students are not talented, it's just because they don't see the need for them, which I think is the saddest part about this data. State regulations here are similar to the other ones, to the other report that I offered to you, where they all share the same definition, 81.5% at the high school level. If they provided guidance at all to the gifted education students, it was provided through curriculum, and that was only about 11.1%. And let's see, district coordinators in 15 school districts reported that their states did not have any rules or regulations governing programs for gifted and talented. So this was kind of funny because some of the coordinators didn't even realize that their state actually had regulations. So, and you'll see why, because not all of the it was reported that it's not a requirement for people to get certification for gifted and talented expertise. So if the program coordinator, say they were an educator and then they moved up because of their experiences, they were delegated as gifted education or gifted gate administrator, well, they may not know the state's regulations and governing procedures for the gifted program. So this to me speaks to the deficit of the administrative staff that are available or full-time in the high school setting. So as shown in the table, 32.3% of the districts were funded by local sources only, while in another 16.1% of districts, the funding comes from a combination of state and local sources. This is huge because if a school is situated within a district that is in under a low economic status, free or reduced lunch, they're not going to have the resources. They're not going to have any local funding, so they would only be able to depend on state funding, which is really low. In 28 districts, 27.7% of the coordinators reported having no funding. So that's 30%, and not including the percentage of coordinators that did not respond. And just to let you know, interesting enough, the I thought at least it was interesting. Nevada did have, let me see the numbers. There was a report. There were some responses to this survey, but not the middle school one, which I thought was pretty interesting, to say the least. So for this survey, 3 surveys were distributed. Only 1 survey was returned at a 33.3% rate. So that's a low percentage considering all the cities and states, all the cities that we have a part of our state. That is crazy. But at least we got 1. Anywho. And there are only 3 coordinators, which is also crazy because of all the school districts that make up this state. So it just speaks volumes to the decline, or I guess the lack of relevance that gifted programming might have in our state. Last but not least, 30%, 29.7% district coordinators reported not receiving any state level funding support for high school programs. So that means that they either depended on their school budget, or they did classroom modifications that were affordable. Challenges with gifted education in high school include districts lack administrative supports for high school gifted programs on a full-time basis or beyond the teacher level. So in this report, they page 11 specifically highlighted the fact that either the teacher was certified gifted or they were delegated based on their experiences, but most of the people who were operating gifted programs were part-time. There was a lack of requirement of gifted education endorsements for teaching gifted students. So 2/3, which is 66.2% of the district coordinators, reported that an endorsement in gifted education was not required for teaching high school gifted and talented students, which is interesting because for anything else that you teach, there is a requirement. So it kind of shocked me that there was not a requirement here. Sorry, I had to fix that. How can you teach something that you haven't been endorsed to teach? Even if you have experiences with teaching it, you should have some level of endorsement or some type of certification. Lastly, 36 district coordinators indicated district level requirements for training or background were different or went beyond those required by the state. Among additional requirements most often noted were professional training in gifted education and strong content knowledge or specific degree in content area taught. So there is a limited amount of training and not a huge support for endorsements for teaching gifted students beyond the teacher, which is very interesting for the high school level because it seems like they need it the most as they're at the ending point of their secondary academic career. It seems like there would be more of an investment at the very end because it's like this is where you're getting ready to be launched into the world, so why wouldn't they invest a little bit more? Definition of giftedness and student identification. So state definitions guided the programming and vary from not having a specific definition to using the state definition or adding their own version of the definition of what it means to be gifted. Identification at the high school level occurs only at 58.9% within the districts, while in the remaining districts, services are provided based on an identification process at the middle school level. So what that tells you is that if a student comes from middle school and they weren't diagnosed as being gifted or talented, then they're about 50%, a little bit under 50%, not likely to, or least likely to be diagnosed in high school. So they could have a talent, they could have a gift, but because it wasn't identified in the earlier stages of their academic career in secondary education, it won't be noted in high school. So it's really up to the teacher to kind of notice the talent and the gifts of their students, especially if you have a gifted student who just went unnoticed, which can happen. I mean, high school students, they come in an array of personalities and learning characteristics. So it's interesting that that number is so high or so low in regards to who gets identified or who gets labeled as being gifted. How does gifted education services look in high school? Well, as you probably already guessed, it is more structured within the school or classroom environment, not whole school, but classroom. So you have a lot of project-based learning, problem-based learning, ability grouping, and multi-tier teaching, which is differentiated instruction, similar to compacting curriculum. There were a plethora of examples that I found. I also didn't add here magnet schools, magnet program schools, which you see a lot of here, charter schools, which you see a lot of here, that specialize in particular gifted areas that students are interested in. But this is how educators mitigate the damages of programmatic shortages from the district level. So let's take a look. This first one is Gifted and Talent Center. So this is an entire school or center at Wheatbridge High School that focuses on gifted and talented students at the high school level.
I really feel that the Gifted and Talented program, first and foremost for me, is a safe haven for absolutely everyone. I feel like it's a place that people can go no matter what's going on in their life. If they're having difficulty with school, or just really, even if they're not having any difficulties.
Tomorrow, it is here to serve the needs of diverse learners that don't always get addressed in the typical educational system.
What do you define as giftedness?
Thinking outside the box, not being one of those people that go around saying hashtag all the time and like going with the flows of every high school student. You gotta be different.
Nay, 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 I'm a horse. It means my heart and my soul. The GT program, it's one of those situations, I call this the perfect storm at Wheatbridge High School. It feels like we are in the middle of something incredibly wonderful. And to be part of that and watching students grow and change.
It's absolutely huge because I really truly feel like for one of the first times in teaching that I'm making a huge difference.
To think that that is something that's in my life and I get to do every day.
They just care so much about us and they make a stride to make sure that we actually understand.
They're all like, hey, do you what you want? We will support you. They are able to form close bonds with 150 students, which is very admirable.
And what do you define as giftedness?
Giftedness. I mean, how long do you have to sit here? How much tape is on this camera?
That is a really good question because we in our program define giftedness, not just academic giftedness. People are gifted in many areas, and we try to broaden up the lens and include all areas of giftedness and talent because it is gifted and talented.
We brought people in here who are coming in because they're good at soccer. They're on a club soccer team. We have people who are in here because they're incredible artists. We have people who come in here because they love to shoot film. They love to make documentaries, and puppet shows, and haunted houses, and just amazing things that we get to bring into our classes. No matter what it is, I really truly believe that everyone in here has a strength area that makes them unique.
Okay, so that was an awesome example of a different way of grouping or meeting the needs of gifted students within the school. We'll take a look at ability grouping within an inclusive setting.
The Davidson Academy is a one-of-a-kind school for profoundly gifted students with an online campus for students living anywhere in the United States and a day school located on the University of Nevada, Reno campus for local residents.
Our goal was to do something meaningful in the area of education.
We did a lot of research on gifted schools and programs. There are other institutions for gifted kids, however, this was unique.
What we needed was not just an academic challenge, but social peers.
And having a school full of profoundly gifted students is just an amazing environment to be in.
When you come to the school, you're surrounded by a community of teachers and students who want to learn or want you to learn as much as you do, and I think that that's something you can't get anywhere else.
The people here, the staff, the students, the teachers, the entire community, it's not like any other school.
The most rewarding aspect of working with profoundly gifted young people is really allowing them to be themselves.
Curriculum is designed specifically for Academy middle and high school classes and focuses on higher level thinking.
Our classes are typically 15 students or less, and it's definitely a very critical thinking oriented type approach.
My middle school students, when they first come to the academy, they grow about 3 years in English in their first year here.
So all of our curricula are developed with the idea of we want to see your process, we want to see how your mind works.
History, it's not at all about memorizing dates or anything. It's mainly about thinking critically, like drawing big picture connections like to the present day, and so I'm finding that really interesting.
Teaching at the academy is what, as a college student going into teaching, what we dreamed that teaching would be like.
The Davidson Academy provides profoundly gifted students an appropriately challenging education.
At the Davidson Academy, the students are grouped by ability, not by age. And that's a true game changer.
In August before school starts, we have placement testing for math and science, and any student is welcome to take any level test they want.
The Personalized Learning Plan, or PLP, is developed for every student here at Davidson.
So what that means is we place students based on their abilities rather than their age or their traditional grade level.
The PLP, the Personalized Learning Program, is very different because it means that students are organizing their classes based on ability level.
When I came in, I was an Algebra 1. That was the first class I took. I was 9. That's fine. But I also have some friends who were like 9 or 10 when they came and they started in calculus. So you have those opportunities available here that aren't necessarily available at other schools.
Age has nothing to do with placement ever. It is merely a matter of what level are you in every subject. And the cool thing about that is once we get that process finished, we've got what we call ability grouping, and then everybody's at a pretty similar level in the class.
And because they do the personalized learning, they're able to just really excel at everything that they want to do, and they don't put a limit to that.
Located on the University of Nevada, Reno campus, students learn at an accelerated pace while working side by side with their intellectual peers. And with the addition of our online program, the Davidson Academy can reach hundreds of students with the same curriculum.
That they're not just coming into a challenging environment, they're coming into a caring environment where they can be all they can be, surrounded by people who really care about the individual needs of each student.
Every teacher knows most every other student, and so we've got our meetings once a week, our staff meetings, where if there's something going on with the kid, you can bring it up and see if other teachers are seeing the same things.
The quality. I'm gonna stop it here because it kind of goes on for another 10 minutes or so, or 9 minutes. But this setting was a little different from the center because the center was within a high school versus the ability grouping within a Davidson Academy, which was purposefully situated within a gifted and talented school environment. And then their ability grouping is based on the students testing in, and then they get to go to any level based on that testing. So very different, or similar to other ways that I've seen ability grouping, but this ability grouping is very strategic in the fact that it's not within an inclusive setting. It's in the dynamics of a gifted education school, and situated in a way that the student can naturally go to. If they test in the 7th grade or 10th grade math, they can go from 7th grade to 10th grade math without having the restrictions of, or the limitations of, the teaching personnel or the abilities of the teachers within their actual grade level. So I like that model, although it's not realistic for a lot of people. That program is free, and they do have the online component if anyone was interested in exploring that one. And that's the closest one I saw to our state. Here's multi-tier teaching. So this is similar or closer to what we traditionally do in our classrooms today. And we're only going to watch a little bit of it. So you can feel free to go back to the videos after they are done.
The ways in which a multi-tiered system of support is put to work in a middle school or a high school program looks a little different than elementary.
There's not always as much of a delineation between Tier 2 and Tier 3 once you hit secondary, because the students are taking so many different classes and content really becomes number one.
Unlike elementary, where you can pull a small group out, that's not always so in high school. Because if you pull a small group out, they might be missing content.
So for some students, it's as simple as providing time and opportunity to go meet with a teacher after school for additional help. In some courses, it means our learning community leaders who have expertise in special education, in school psychology, in reading education are pushing into some courses where there is a cohort of students that needs a little additional support.
That's where direct gas exchange occurs. Okay. In period 1, I might be in chemistry. In period 2, anatomy and physiology. Period 3 would be 10th grade English.
So we're going to transition into where they pair up and then they...
And I'm providing Tier 2 along with the teacher. A lot of push-in is built around helping them with life skills, organizational skills, study skills, and academic functioning, giving them strategies that maybe help them break down the material.
Yeah, so you see how he's starting here and then
well, it's 2 separate flashbacks. It's a flashback
Correct.
to the call and a
Yes.
flashback to his childhood.
Yes, and so essentially, I go back to school. Taking notes, I'm working with the students, I know what they're covering. If I'm living it every day, I have a really good idea of who's doing what, and then fostering relationships. So then it's kind of like word of mouth advertising. If I develop relationships with my students, they're like, oh, you got to go see Dr. Court. She helped me with that senior project. You've got to go see her. You see, and that's how you get buy-in.
School gets out at 2:05 for secondary, and then you have from 2:10 until 3 to go receive Tier 3 instruction from a learning community leader more on a one-on-one basis.
So this school, because like she said, pull-out is not always doable in the traditional setting of a high school and a middle school. Well, they go into the classroom to offer the multi-tier teaching, and they do it within the dynamics of the curriculum in a regular classroom sessions and also after school, which is, I think, critical to kind of working on what you have. Not everyone has a school psychologist on hand, or those who are able to do that, but if your school does, then it can really speak volumes to how you best meet the needs of the students that you serve based on your dynamics of your school. So that's just an idea and a great example of team teaching with other professionals on your school campus. Here's another example. So we talked a little bit about project-based learning. This is a school that decided to situate every classroom into problem-based learning, and that's the way that they provide the enhancement to their curriculum. Oh, and again, we will not be watching the whole video, so if you want to go back to it, please do at your convenience.
I'm Tom Denwald. I'm principal of Sammamish High School. When I first came here as principal, Sammamish was in a place of declining enrollment. Things weren't working. The staff came together and was thinking about, well, what could we do to take Sammamish to the next level and really serve our students?
We have been fortunate to get a federal grant that's allowed us to move forward with redesigning our school to be a problem-based school, wall-to-wall, in every curricular area.
It's a significant shift from what can be more of a traditional teacher-centered classroom to more of a teacher-facilitated learning process where we engage students in authentic problems. High schools have been very resistant to change. I mean, I think a lot of high schools, you visit them and it could be 50 years ago, and I don't think it has to be that way.
So in 8 days, the school year is going to start. And before that, we are getting together for 5 days of professional development led by Sammamish teachers for Sammamish teachers.
How do I transform my class from being driven by me to students wanting to take ownership?
PBL in a classroom is students actively working together to solve a problem. The problem can be big or small. It can be the type of thing that they can solve through discussion. It can be the type of thing that they build a product around. But ultimately, it's students trying to learn content through the solution to this problem. There is something to students having the opportunity to get together and deal with real-world challenges that makes them hungry for the next challenge. That desire to come back to the table and invest more of themselves in the outcome, we want to grow that feeling in them over the course of these 4 years. That's what gets them to stay involved in education.
This idea that the whole school is focused on problem-based learning is really powerful. 15 years of teaching here, I've seen quite a lot. I'm good at what I do. I would like to be better. I would like to be a more effective teacher.
For an entire school to go through this across the board is a big, big change from what we're seeing other schools doing across the country.
Sammamish has always been on the verge. We're a really good school, and we're on the verge of, I think, always becoming a great school. If there's something that's going to transform our school, this is what it's going to be.
I want to congratulate you guys for being on time. Hold on, slow down. The first day of school, we're going to have a brand new crop of freshmen coming into some brand new classes that we've never taught before. We're hoping that we're going to be able to get them engaged early on and help them see the benefits and positives of problem-based learning, but I'm anxious about it.
So, I have to tell you, we've got 5 teachers teaching this class. We've been working on it this summer, so we're really looking forward to it. Your feedback is going to be important to us.
So the rest of the video takes you through the actual curriculum that they have aligned together, and it's really like a hyper version of team teaching where they have completely restructured their way of thinking about teaching, and also and ensuring that students are engaged in exploring their talents. So it's kind of cool because I know that they said they had a grant, but just imagine for a second problem-based learning within the dynamics of your grade level. It could be pretty awesome, especially if you work together as a team to create or help students discover the problem that they wanted to explore, and then broke it into areas of relevance as it pertains to the subject matter that you teach. And then also, you never know, you might get funding to go to a problem-based learning training to ensure that you're integrating it correctly into your course. Here is an example, or integrating it correctly into your teaching practices. Here's an example of project-based learning at the high school level, which is a little different, and then we will wrap this lecture up.
I run the Washington Post.
I ran for president.
I lobby Congress.
We had one student in my former district who dropped out of high school and came to AP Government every day till the end of the year. And he called himself the worst dropout in the history of dropouts because he still showed up. I don't know why he came, but I do. I do know why, because there was a role for him. And he played a part in the classroom learning experience. For him to drop out of high school, but still to come to that class, that was the moment in that first year that changed the way I thought about the course.
What we're working on in the Knowledge in Action project is a way of making advanced high school coursework accessible to more and more children and worth it by making it a deep, rich curriculum that they can take with them into the future.
Do we want to say before or against the Alabama law?
Our interest group would be before this, for the Alabama, because all it is collecting data.
It's hard to collect data when people are not forthcoming. It makes it really hard to get accurate data.
The way we attempt to achieve deep conceptual learning is primarily through a particular kind of rigorous project-based learning. It's not uncommon in an AP course to have a project or two. We're trying to drive the course through projects, which is to say through experiential learning. 2,000 students stop going to school. Alabama's school system is going to fall apart because there's not going to be government funding.
2,000 students in a state that probably has, what, 10, 13 million? Somewhere in there?
How many of those 13 million go to school?
Well, AP Gov is a class that has traditionally been taught in one semester. So in one semester, they fly through all the institutions of government, as well as how they're linked together and how they're linked to the people. And it has traditionally been a very lecture-oriented course because it's a lot of content to get through and not a whole lot of time. The idea came of, well, could we make an entire course in government that really is about how we put kids in the middle of these situations and not how we just tell kids about these situations.
These people that are here illegally, if they're here legally, if we make it possible for them to get a green card, they'll then in turn be paying taxes, they'll be benefiting our society instead of hurting it.
I came on board after the AP US Government and Politics course was in place, and the team wanted to add a second course, AP Environmental Science.
So, 1%, where's 1%?
Only 4 of them are living. Everybody understands, all of these brilliant, hardworking teachers that teach AP know that what they need to deliver is a large proportion of their students passing that test. So the most direct route to doing that is to teach to the test. Well, what we're trying to do is figure out a way to drive more learning into that course. So in our courses, students are very often involved in a simulation. In the case of the AP Gov course, they're taking the role of a Supreme Court justice, or somebody running a campaign or running for office.
It's not communistic. What he wants to do is reinforce
Sharing the wealth among people who didn't earn
reinforce
it.
the already existing programs, such as Social Security. All we're doing is strengthening the social safety net so that we can have free trade that is also fair trade.
Sometimes you lose the sense of you're in a role, you're not actually really that person, but sometimes you become that person without even realizing it.
So it's different than any kind of class where you would just have a lecture, do a worksheet or an activity, maybe make a poster at the end and take a test. This is structured completely differently so that from the very beginning, students have a role that they play and a need to know.
All these activities.
So I'm going to stop it there and you can watch the rest on your own. But I think that option was pretty cool because it enhances a traditional AP course and takes it beyond the text and kind of helps students realize and further develop their genius. So of all those examples, I mean, from the classroom of project-based learning to a school effort of project-based learning to the community partnership learning, multi-tier teaching option that you saw, also to the 2 schools that one had a center for gifted students and one had the ability grouping. Davidson's Academy, which is an entire school designated to teaching gifted students with the online option, which is free if you're interested, but there are options out there. So I gave you a plethora of examples that you can go back to, but the key thing here is that meeting the needs of gifted and talented students within high school settings is contingent upon the district budgetary restrictions and programs. So if there are restrictions that you can't minimize, you will have to start looking at the options that you currently have. So maybe you see a student who has gone undiagnosed and should be in an AP course. You know, you may want to test them in or see what options you can get as far as with the work and integrating that work into your course, or getting them into an honors course, or maybe suggesting a close routed magnet school for them to test into. You also have the option to integrate virtual schools or programs for gifted students, and also find opportunities for summer and after school enrichment options for students. But all in all, one of the things that you want to keep in mind of is that it may be difficult to provide the resources, but it's not impossible. And although high school settings are challenged with budgetary issues, lack of diagnosing of gifted and talented abilities, and also a regulated structure with a support of a gifted administrator at the district level, you can still get it done. So here's an additional resource I just have here for you from Davidson. If you have any questions about any of the other resources, please feel free to email me. These PowerPoints, just like the other ones, are under our resources for the week through the Padlet, so please download the PowerPoint and then feel free to watch the rest of the videos. Okay, hope this array of information has provided you with some ideas for your activities that you're planning for your final project, which is a lesson plan. Enjoy your weeks, and thank you for tuning into this lecture. Have a great day.